Hi everyone, and welcome back to my podcast. I'm Stephen Hart. I'm an ex-Royal Naval clearance diver. I was also a salvage diver and also an air and saturation diver. And these episodes, these stories are about my time during that period. Some of them interesting, some of them funny, and some of them quite frightening. And I hope you enjoy them all. In this episode 9, is when I leave a drill ship. We were doing a lot of bell bounce, the EW Thornton, working in the Gulf of Thailand. That contract finished, and I got a job with Oceaneering, which is another diving company, quite a well-known diving company, may still be going today. Oceaneering were based in Singapore. They had an office in Singapore, and I went for an interview basically just for multiple jobs. They said they had a diving ship that was called the YUYO, and it was located just off Sarawak, East Malaysia, and at some point I would join that. But one of the first jobs I got was to fly out to Malaysia. There was an emergency job. There was quite a few of us sent out to a rig, choppered out to a rig. There was no bell on board. It was really just Heliox surface diving. It was about 240, 250 feet to the seabed. We had a chamber on board, cage, all that had been set up, and they had been diving prior to us arriving. So when I arrived, a lot of the guys had already been burnt out for that 12-hour shift. So I literally arrived on the platform and was told I will be going in, not this dive, but the next. It was pitch black, nighttime. And you're at least 40 to 50 foot off the water. So you get in a cage with your surface gear on, and the cage brings you down to a certain depth where from that point you'll drop down onto seabed and then work your way in towards conductors. Conductors, big massive steel tubes that come down, and what you have is like guides, and they should slide through the guides all the way to seabed. The one just at the seabed, they could not get it. They were trying to move it left and right. It would not stab. It would not go into the guides. Now, these are massive things, huge bits of steel. So they were explaining a lot of the divers had already been in and still not able to do this. The water was fairly clear, but at night, obviously, you when you leave surface, you get the lights from the platform, but once you hit about 100 feet or whatever, it's pitch black. So you've got a little torch with you that you can try and find the conductor. But as many dives before, they'd run a rope. So when the cage comes down with you in it, it also has a rope that guides you all the way down to where the conductor is. Now, this is almost in the center of the platform, and there's a lot of debris on the seabed, so it's pretty dodgy diving. Like I say, I'd done quite a bit of surface bell bounce. I'd done a lot of surface air diving, deep air diving. This was probably my first Heliox surface dive. Didn't make any difference, just breathing Heliox, you're going to spend a bit more time on the seabed. So I get briefed, I get in the cage. Again, I've got a pair of overalls on, it's pretty warm. You're going down, it's the weirdest feeling, and when I moved to the North Sea and many other jobs, in the cages, it's a frightening experience initially. As I move from this, when I head back to the North Sea, I'll tell you a few stories about that. Flat cam. Beautiful Malaysian evening. As we're going down, I see all the lights. I'm getting myself prepared. We leave surface. And again, you get these thermoclines. You get periods of quite warm and periods of bloody freezing. Eventually, we stop the cage, and it's about 30 or 40 foot off the seabed. One thing you don't want is the cage dropping onto the seabed, because it's got a good chance of keeling over with you in it. So we leave the cage. We're just a big, massive umbilical all the way to the surface. There's no hot water. It carries communication and gas, and pretty much that's it. And a line that's like a safety line that's put through the umbilical, which is all taped together. And you have a harness on, you're connected to that with a bailout bottle. Bailout bottles are particularly important. If you lose gas from the surface, if I lost gas, I would let the surface know. They would then be able to put me onto a secondary supply on the surface. There's always primary and secondary supplies. But as soon as you start to feel that go tight, there's a big urge to open up your bailout. And there's a valve on the side of your helmet that you can open, and if the pressure is less coming in from the surface, it will start to feed you gas. But it doesn't last very long. It's only a little bottle. So it really is just enough for you to stop, head back to the cage and get you to the surface, or give them time to fix whatever the problem is. We land there and I'm a bit disorientated. It's pitch black with a tiny little torch. So we leave there and I work my way down, and I start, the rope works its way inside the platform, and there is metal and big lumps of there's stuff that's lying everywhere on the seabed. Working my way over that, you got to be very careful you didn't cut yourself. Eventually I got there, and you can see this conductor, and it is just, there's a vibration because they're trying to push it down. So I get there and I start to talk to the surface, telling them, giving them measurements and things like that about where it is in relation, and whether they want to come to the east, west, not whatever, to try and stab it in. So we're there with this little torch. Keep yourself well out the way. And this thing just keeps coming down, boom, boom. It just would not go. It was just so far out that it was bashing into one side. And eventually they were really, really desperate to get this in. But I think I was down there for about 20 minutes. But what was very strange is that I think it's the vibration. You have a feeling like you're not alone. And I could see these grouper. Now, most of the time, I've been in the water with them many times, and they're very inquisitive. They don't attack you or anything, but they look very angry. And they were really close to me. Well, because I had the torch, they were coming in very, very close, almost nudging you. They're big, but they're not huge. But I kept flashing my torch at them. And the more I flashed my torch or looked in their eye, and it's very disconcerting when you're in the middle of the platform, 230 feet, and you've got this noise of the conductor trying to be rammed into the guide. It's very surreal. It's a very surreal environment. Eventually, it would not go in. Myself and the other guys that had come out, they were the last sort of hope to get it in. Because we'd all run out by then. Everybody had been dived out. So we couldn't start till probably about 12 hours later. Eventually, they said, look, forget it, get back to the basket. We're bringing you up. I'm back to the basket. I'm sitting there, and I know I've got a couple of wet stops sitting in the cage at stops to allow decompression before I actually hit the surface. And I always remember on my second one, it's fairly close to the surface, about 60 feet or whatever. Lots of light, and it's the weirdest feeling. And it's a feeling that I never quite got over, and that is just hanging in the water. And I mentioned it on the EW Thornton, when you're just in the cage and you can see things around you, and you do get the odd flash of something on the outskirts. So I'm sitting there, and I don't know if they did this deliberately, but I got a call from the supervisor, and he said, look, Stephen, just to let you know, the platform not that far away from us, they've reported tiger sharks in the water. They must have been diving as well. And the minute he said that, I was trying to look 360 degrees. They're pretty aggressive, tiger sharks. I never seen any, but just that feeling of being in the cage and just trying to look to see if there were any around. I was very glad to hear leave that stop and coming all the way up. When you leave that stop, you literally leave the stop of 5 minutes. So all you're really doing is ripping out the water, rushing you to the surface. When you get on the surface, you drop all your kit. Just pull off all your kit, pull off all your wet gear, and you're running towards a chamber. There's no locking on with the bell. You literally run. Surface decompression is called. Open, in there, blow down to whatever depth, and then we go on O2. And it took about, I don't know, it's about 3 or 4 hours in there. I was in there for quite a long time. But I was kind of used to it from the bell bounce diving. But this was a bit bit more primitive. I get the feeling it was a bit of a rushed job to get the kit out there and start putting people in the water. And after that, it was fine. But then we had 12 hours off, and then we did another dive. But that dive, it was during the day, so I was able to see bits and pieces. And I think I was the second or third, and they were very, very close to start to getting it in now. They'd made some adjustments during that 12-hour period. My dive was just really to take a couple of measurements, and then it was back up. So it wasn't as long in the water as the first one. But that was my first dives with Oceaneering. Like I said, it's almost like an odd job. They just go, right, we'll drop you here. I did another job, again in East Malaysia section, near Place Labuan and Miri. This one, when I arrived, I was quite naive about what is in the water. And then this particular one, this small satellite platform, we were taking some readings, there'd been some damage, and they wanted to take thickness readings to see if, because a wire had rubbed against one of the legs and actually cut right into it. So they wanted some readings. Now, nowadays, and when I went to North Sea, you would have like a little digital unit. You would just have a little tip on it, and you just push it against it, it would give you a reading, a thickness reading. This was 1980-81, and I remember putting this unit on. It had a light at the top. It was like a small TV attached to you with straps. It was actually strapped onto your chest with a ratchet. So you're undoing, you could ratchet it at a certain angle, and that way had a probe, and you could see the digital readout. But I was standing there, and somebody was adjusting and it's quite a heavy unit. Somebody was adjusting the ratchet, and again, just overalls on. And when he did it, the whole unit just fell forward and smacked me right in the nuts. I'm not joking. Many men out there will know the feeling when you get a good smack in the nuts. You just about throw up. And it was that moment of like, I could watch him doing it. I'm thinking, oh, he's tightening up. And he was actually bloody loosening the thing. And it just went whack straight into my nuts and my knees. And I just remember thinking, because you do feel immediately sick. I was standing there like trying to lie on the ground. And he was like, well, okay. And I said, no, I'm not. I need to get out of this, and I need to try and be sick a little bit. So I was a bit off, but I put the helmet back on. It was a bit, you do these little jobs. You always want to be looking as professional as possible, but being smacked in the nuts was very difficult. So we got this on, I actually went down. And as I'm down, it was only like 20 or 30 feet. It was quite shallow. Calm evening, beautiful. As I get in the water and I'm swimming on the surface to get to the leg, I notice there's about 6 sea snakes, yellow and black, and they're bloody big, and they're all there on the surface just swimming around. And I spoke to the supervisor. I said, look, it's bloody sea snakes, and we've only got overalls on. I haven't got any gloves or anything. So he said, oh, no, don't worry about that. They're not poisonous. They won't bite you, But I'm literally going through them on the surface. And they'll stay away from you, but they're fairly big. That's another interesting job. I did a few more go out to act as a diver wanted off, and I'd go on to fill his place for a week or two and then come back. I think they liked what I was doing. After 4 or 5 jobs, they asked me if I'd like to go on, because I had bell diving experience, if I'd like to go on the YUYO, which is a Japanese diving support vessel. It had a saturation system on board. So they wanted guys out there, and it really acted in the field as if you wanted divers, we were there. We would come alongside and we would do whatever is required. My first dive there, I flew out to Sarawak, East Malaysia, and arrived at Labuan or wherever it was, I can't remember. The ship was actually quite close, so we had a Zodiac come in and pick us up. It's not a massive ship, and the Bell is probably one of the smallest bells I've been in. I thought the EW Thornton was a small bell, but my God, this was small. But our first dive, I had an American diver who said, look, I'm popping across to finish off some work. We had floating buoys close to us. One of the job was just to swim from the ship, would you believe, which was a good sort of 50 metres to the buoy, go under the buoy, and work our way all the way down to the bottom, about 80 feet. pitch black, absolutely pitch black. As soon as you leave surface, near where we were, it was a massive estuary. Just mud and whatever came out that river into the sea. So I swam across with him, both of us on the surface, just scuba, and went down. And I worked my way down. We had discussed on the surface. He said, look, I know the job. It's pretty dark down there. You just stay where you are. I'll stop you. I'll go and do the job to finish off tightening the bolt. And then you and I will come to the surface. So I'm there in 80 feet and I'm waiting. And I could hear him banging away, I'm thinking, right, okay. I'm waiting. And I think, God, he's taking a long time. And I began to look at my contents gauge, which was getting quite low. And eventually I thought, I was sort of banging on the side to let him know that we need to get up. But he wasn't coming and it was getting very close. So I just moved up a little bit. And when I moved up a little bit, you get a little bit more air. But it was getting a bit tight. And eventually I got up just below the buoy. So I was waiting for him. I didn't want to leave him there, but I had no choice really. And I remember just looking up and there was just barracuda everywhere. You didn't see them when you got underwater, but you're looking up to the light, you could just see these barracuda everywhere. And eventually this guy appears almost like racing to the surface because he wasn't looking at his contents gauge. He just basically almost ran out of gas all the way to the surface. Eventually him and I get to the surface and swim across. I didn't think it was particularly... Number one, we should have the Zodiac alongside there, with the equipment, whatever. Just swimming from the ship just wasn't a good idea. Anyway, we get back on board and we do a few little jobs. One of them was that they'd put in a pipeline coming out of this estuary. They were flooding the pipeline to sink it, or they were sinking it further out. And they wanted to make sure that it was sinking in the estuary as well at the same time. So we would go in and take readings just on scuba. But pitch black, there's things in there you don't want to know about. So that was one job. We took care of that. Eventually this pipe sunk. I do remember being on deck for the first time. I was on night shift. We were right alongside the jungle, fairly close to the jungle. And when I came out, we just have shorts, boots, no top on. It was roasting. And I remember looking across and I'm thinking one of the ship's lights, and I see what looks like a bird bashing against it, like boom, boom, boom. And eventually it lands on the ground. And I went across, poor bird. As I walked across, it wasn't a bird. It was one of the biggest beetles I have ever seen. It was massive. It must have been a good 6 inches long. It was huge with these they have encased wings which make a horrible noise, and it just bashed itself into the light. And you would always look up the lights, there would be like tons of insects. That would just give you an idea of the deck work. If we were diving, we would be on deck. We'd be maintaining equipment. One of their satellite platforms had actually keeled over. Three tripod platform. It was about 150 feet of water, but it was fairly out, crystal clear water. And they wanted people to go into SAT to start to do some work on it. And one of the ones was that they were worried that it below the surface, it was beginning to leak oil. So we wanted a survey to see how we could recover it. And number two, shut some valves down. I got chosen myself and a few other guys. Well, my bell partner was a guy called Al Frankfurter, 6 foot odd Canadian. Great guy, big tash, big porn star tash. Good guy, good diver. Him and I are going to be blown down first. So they're doing all the tests on the bell, checking it. You can't see this satellite tripod platform. It's keeled over, but we're above it anyway. Now they wanted to do some further checks. So they said, would you mind getting in the bell and we'll blow you down and we'll do our final checks. Then we'll put you in the water. Now we had hot water suits because we were going to be in the water for about 6 hours each in the water, total of 12 hours in the bell. Both of us got in. I've got a picture I'll put up on the screen of Al and I waiting to go in. I always remember this massive container. Water is very important when you're in fluid. I mean, you just, especially there, it was like 35, 40 degrees. It was roasting on deck. And this bell had been sitting there, so you can imagine how hot it was inside. Plus you've got all the umbilicals. Plus we've got hot water suits. And it's the first time I'd worn a hot water suit. Basically, hot water's pumped from the surface down to the bell and then to your umbilical, which is in the bell, and then you plug it into the suit. It's like an oversized wetsuit with tubes. And as the hot water comes in, it pushes it down your arms, your legs, your chest. It's very nice. To be truthful, I don't think I ever turned mine on when I was inside, because you'd maybe turn it on a little bit. It was either too bloody hot or too bloody cold. It was, so you kind of let what they call dump. So it would be coming down, but it would be just dumping into the sea. And if you needed some, you just change it and it would give you a sort of boost of warm or hot water around your body. You can imagine it's very warm. The bell's been on deck. It's made of steel. We both get inside, close the inner door, they close the outer door, and they blow us down on deck. So they blow us down the equivalent depth of 150 feet on Heliox. Obviously, you start breathing Heliox, and your voice becomes like Mickey Mouse. And I don't know, he started to speak, and I could not stop laughing. Just seeing him, this big guy, with a big chin and everything, it was like, and speaking like Mickey Mouse, I was in fits of laughter. And the more I laughed, more he was laughing. In fact, the supervisors were a bit weird. They were shouting, "You two, get a grip. Bloody hell, calm down." But it was so hot inside. And they were flushing it, obviously, with fresh gas to try and cool us down. But I do remember there was a delay. So we were about an hour and a bit on deck before we even got in the water. And they were doing checks, whatever they do. We were doing our bell checks, whatever. We started to take mouthfuls of the water because we're really hydrated. And then eventually I thought, we need to get in the water. It's going to be another. Once we arrive on the bottom, we're going to be out there 6 hours in the water each. So we eventually get us in. Such a relief. We're going down. And this is a tiny bell. Rammed in my umbilicals. We've got hot water in, which tends to heat up in there as well. So we got down, inner door open, bottom door drops open, and we're ready to dive. And I'm doing the first dive. So I'm out, got my gear on, drop out, got lights on the bell. Eventually I work my way across and I find where we're going to airlift. You can imagine it's the three legs, and then down the centre is where they're sucking the oil out. And that had keeled over and bent, but it had bent below. It was about 20 or 30 feet where they reckoned. Initially, I thought it was 10 feet, but actually it was deeper, further down. So we got airlifts, and then airlifts is basically they're sending air down, and it's that technique of pushing air into a massive tube creates a vacuum, and it pulls and starts sucking up the mud, and it was just goo, this mud. So I got down there, and I have wetsuit booties on. So we're there, and this is a big hunk of stuff, The minute it starts working, you're deafened. You get it positioned right next to where this tube goes in, and I asked them to kick it off, get it going. So it starts, and I'm manoeuvring it around, and it takes a bit of getting your shoulders and pushing it around. And I just noticed as it hits the mud, it goes almost straight down, and sucks both my booties off. Gone. No booties. And the seabed was like covered in God knows what. But it's my first sat. I'm not going to mention that to anyone. So I'm getting it, I'm manoeuvring it around. And the idea is to create, you start and you work your way out each time. You dig down and work your way out. So you end up with this sort of hole so you can get down. But it was pitch black. Honestly, it's with the mud and everything, you did zero. And you're just airlifting for 6 hours. 6 hours. And we're just sucking. I mean, I remember it was pitch black, and you're kind of warm, and you're giving yourself some warm water and sucking away, and there's this constant drone from the airlift. And I had this weird feeling that I was at home. It was very, very strange. I always remember this. I always remember thinking, I was kind of woke up, and I think I'd fallen asleep because the supervisor was screaming at me because I wasn't replying. You're just buggered that first dive. Anyway, we finish it and I'm going back to the bell. So I get back to the bell, get up inside, and then I give a brief to Al. And Al's like, Stephen, would you mind, because he had drunk a lot of the water. He said, would you mind just leaving me some water? Because I'm still really thirsty. It's just madness. And I said, no problem at all. No problem. I'd try not to drink, but I had to drink a load when I got back just to get myself at a reasonable stage. I was quite dehydrated and quite tired. Anyway, I'm feeding my umbilical out and he goes out. We're using Kirby 17s or a solid hat with a neck ring. I'll tell you a story later on about that neck ring. You have to be very, very, very careful. It locks on. So you have your helmet and this lower neck ring has a seal that locks on. You have a unit where as you push it in, it tightens onto the upper helmet and you've got like neoprene here. And one of the things is normally there's a pin so it can't be pulled out. Put your pin in. But I always, from experience, I put my hand behind. There's a little lug at the back this thing hooks onto. And I always had two things I did. One, feel the lug and it's on. The second one, I would take hold of this and give it a good pull. Because if it came off then, fine, we can fix it. If it comes off in the water, yeah, you haven't got any hope at all. A helmet would flood. You'd be finished. So I'm there and I'm checking Al, and Al goes out. And after I would say about 3 hours, maybe a bit more, maybe 3.5 hours, he said, look, Al's coming back to the bell. Can you check his chin? He said he's in a lot of pain. So, yeah, sure. So I got in and get him up into the trunking and take his helmet off. And as I'm taking the helmet off, I could hear him go, Inside your helmet is a liner. And in the liner is a little bit of Velcro that holds it and it goes under your chin. And what had happened was, obviously, Al had quite a big chin, so he couldn't get the Velcro to actually come together. So what he had was this raw bits of Velcro. So when he's working away, this Velcro had just been rubbing and rubbing and rubbing against his chin. And when I actually looked at it, remember this is in the sea, and it was like just raw flesh. A good sort of 1.5 inches, and by maybe an inch, pretty much skin had gone here. How he'd continued, I don't know. Bloody tough guy, I tell you. And he kept saying, is it okay, Stephen? Is it okay? And I was like, no, it's not that good. So we got some tape. It made no difference. I put a bit of tape and tucked his Velcro up the side so that it wouldn't be near it. But he went back in again. My God, that must have been painful. And it did get infected later. But he did continue to dive. He came back, and it's such a relief, to get that first dive finished and done. And we shared what was left of the water up. Again, the bell locks on to a chamber. This is quite a larger living chamber. It's enough for 4 people to sleep. It's got a toilet, and the toilet is normally where the bell locks onto. So the bell comes over the top, locks onto the top. When the area dropped down to is where the toilet is it's just a toilet, really. And then from there, you go into a living room. Very small. 4 bunks. And you do a brief with other divers. So you take your gear out, and then the next divers are there ready to bring their gear in to start doing their bell checks. And you think, now we're about 14 hours now, 15 hours almost. And you think, well, you just go to bed. No, you got to wait for them to get all their gear in. That's unlocked because the procedure is that there's doors to be shut inside to make sure that if that bell's ripped off or damaged, we don't die. And that's happened quite a few times in the North Sea and throughout the world. So by now, you also want to get something to eat. So they put food in. So now it's 16 hours. You've been around. And the food, this is an interesting thing in saturation. So you're breathing Heliox, helium and oxygen. You lose your taste. It's a weird thing. So we would always have extra sauce and things like that. So we'd get as much as we could eating. We also have to make sure we're putting in eardrops because inside that chamber is like a breeding ground for disease. And it's very, very common to get ear infections. So you take these eardrops every day to try and prevent that. But also, you're scrubbing inside the chamber with different chemicals to try and kill all this. I didn't sleep very well at all. Even though you're inside the chamber, there's just noise outside. There's people monitoring you to make sure that you're not going to die. Life support technicians, very important people, and always keep on their side. And this goes on for quite a number of days, because it takes probably about 5 days for us to actually expose and do videos and look at how we're possibly going to repair this or cut it and cap it, which I didn't get involved in. But as we finished exposing that area and doing all the survey work, we then went on to do the upper. So where it keeled on its side, it was a sort of angle, and right on top was a blowout preventer, and it was a surface one. But it was just, it'd been bashed a bit. So we were doing surveys on that, and there's just valves everywhere. I was really tired. I mean, you can imagine, you're just continuously diving 12 hours, 6 out in the water, and 6 hours. You're not getting much sleep. And you can never eat enough food. So eventually, I'm doing this bell. We're a bit shallower, and it's beautiful. You can see for bloody miles underwater, looks like. So the first day, I'm out there, and it's night for us. So I swim across. Beautiful. You can actually see the ship. You can see where the bells come down. Bells sitting just above you. Very, very nice. Very nice compared to the black hole, as we called it. I got up there, and for some reason, marine growth goes very quickly. So when this keeled over, it must have been about 3 or 4 months ago. Because when we got to the top, it was just covered in very fine bits, lumps of marine growth. It was very, very weird how quickly they were taking over. So I went back to bed, got a wire brush and a scraper, and I thought we'd better scrape off these valves, and we were going to take pictures, etc., and do some repairs. So I'm there and I'm scraping away, and it's night, and I've got a camera and a light, so wherever I look at is lit up. So I'm looking at this, and I'm scraping away, and I notice little fish coming in and eating the whatever I'm scraping. And then I just get this flash, quite large flash, just on the outskirts of a light, because the bell is sort of above you with the lights pointing down. So when I look, I just see these large shapes coming round, just touching. They weren't coming in completely, but you could see, and then they were sharks for sure. Not massive, but you could see them just come in, just touch a light and zoom off. It was really unnerving. I didn't particularly like that, because I was scraping, I'd lift my head up, and I'd be scraping, lift my head up. I was telling the surface, I think we've got some sharks around here, and they were telling Al and the bell, who was just like me, did not like the idea of being in the water with the sharks. We were never touched. And the whole time there, it was always, you get the small fish, and you get slightly bigger fish coming in as well, but I never had the sharks come in. But you could, now and again, just see a little flash of quite a larger fish on the outskirts of the light. It's interesting, because I actually fell asleep again on that dive. I was locked on top. This thing was pointing at a very funny angle, and I'd wrapped my legs around it and jammed myself in between a couple of things. So the whole thing was just taking my weight and umbilical. I was doing my work, and I sort of stopped for a minute, and I must have just closed my eyes, and I was out. And it was interesting, because we had a tiny little ROV, remotely operated vehicle, with his little eyes in the sky, we'd call them. And I could hear it. It just woke me up slightly. It was like, And all I heard from the supervisor was, "You, Stephen, bloody wake up." And seemingly I had leaned back with my helmet, because it's quite heavy and you got a bit of a sore neck. I'd put my helmet up against the thing I was leaning against, and my eyes were, and this thing had come across and said, "Hey, that diver's eyes are closed." So first time, get caught sleeping on the job. That particular one was a really nice job, because we had plenty of time to do it. I mean, the whole time in SAT, SAT at that time, I don't know what's, the 80s and 90s, it was not pleasant. There was no limitation to the number of days. The money was good. I was getting $12 an hour, 24 hours a day. So you paid 24 hours, which was good money then. But it's not a healthy job. Not at all. I mean, I came out after 21 days and I had terrible skin. And it started when I finished the airlifting. Now, what was on the bottom of that was mud, drill mud, and it's just full of chemicals and oil. So when you have this hot water turned on, what it does is it opens up the pores in a line, and anywhere where the hot water was, I just ended up with really bad sores, just like blackheads and really pussy sores all over my arms, my legs. And because you're getting no sun at all, and you cannot keep up with the food, honest, we were eating everything that moved, and I was still losing a bit of weight because you're physically in the water all pretty much 6 hours a day. And in your 6 hours in the bell, which I disliked, I'd rather be out in the water, to be honest. It goes quicker. Eventually, we're brought to the surface. You're decompressed in the chamber, and eventually we get out. It took about a couple of days of decompression to get out of the chamber. But I do remember coming out, and I was pretty buggered. I did feel, I mean, I was a young guy, but I still felt pretty rough coming out. And it took, I think we left then, I had 2 weeks off. I was probably recovered within the 2 weeks because we ended up flying to Phuket for a little holiday and etc. When I flew back, they were obviously just about finishing this job, and I was due to go back in. To be truthful, I was looking forward to get a bit more a bit more money. But when they said, look, we're going to move from here to another job, I was kind of glad because the next job, which I won't go into too much, it was pretty straightforward. Sat, lots of survey work. Luckily, I'd done my MPI course, so they were beginning to use that. Lloyd's had said, look, we want you to look at welds and things like that. So I did begin to get a little bit of that. And luckily, I logged some of that in my dive log. So every dive you do, you have your dive log. And that has to be, you write what you do, your depth, your date. Dive logs become quite important. So if you go to a company, they want to see your dive log. And it should be signed by the supervisor with the company's stamp as well, just to prove you've done these dives, and it gives them an idea of your experience. That was really that period in Singapore, Thailand. But I did get my very last job, my YUYO, it finished completely. It lost again the contract with this offshore company to do the work. Oceaneering were pretty good. They gave me a job in the Middle East off Dubai. So I would live in Singapore, but I would fly to Ras Al Khaimah. So it would go Singapore, Bombay, Ras Al Khaimah, offshore. I can't remember the name of the rig. It was a floater, and it was drill support, very much like EW Thornton. But when I got there, what I did notice was, and it's no reflection on Indian divers, etc., but there were 2 Indian divers who I just thought were absolutely useless. Not because they're Indian, but genuinely, I don't know how they got the qualification. One of them was, he's actually a very rich Indian, and he made his point telling us that how rich he was. And he was always smoking, I always remember that, you know. And so it wasn't a very good kind of atmosphere. But I went on with a friend who I'd met at Oceaneering. Really good guy, British guy. We got on board. These guys, the Indian guys, and a couple of Americans who were supervised. Well, one was supervised, one was a diver, and then 2 Australians, I think. So when we got on board, they had been there before. Myself and a British guy, another Brit. We had come out because 2 guys had left. What I noticed was, compared to the EW Thornton, nobody did anything. It was like they just sat around doing diddly squat most of the time. And I disliked it. Even the supervisor was quite lazy. He wasn't on top of the maintenance. And what I realised was that the bell was really just there to tick a box. They'd never actually put it in the water. Now, when I was there, I wanted for us to get in the bell, get used to the bell, getting bell checks. For me, much more comfortable if I can see that it all works. So I eventually convinced the supervisor to to get the bell in the water. So we got the bell in the water. We only went down to 10 or 15 foot. In fact, I'll show you a picture of it. The water was just full of jellyfish as well. It was horrendous. So we got in the water and it was great. We were happy. Things seemed to be working, and finished that trip, come back the next trip. It was 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Come back, we were due to do a dive. So this suddenly appeared. It was like 8 o'clock at night, and all these drillers came down, and they were like, "We need you to get down there now. We can't stab in. We can't. The camera's not working. You guys need to get in that water right now." The supervisor said, "Right, get the bell ready." He said, "Stephen, you and I can't remember the Australian guy's name. He was a young guy, really good guy. Him and I were going, and I was like, there's all the other guys there that have dived this before. They've been on there about a year." And he said, "Look, all we're going to do is we're going to lower the bell," because the bell was not ready to go deep. I don't know why. He was like, "Well, all I'm going to do, Stephen, is we're just going to lower you down, and then we're going to turn the lights on the bell. And then if you look through the porthole," I was like, okay, "then you can tell us left or right." Well, that didn't go particularly well. We were going down, and as I got in, we were leaving surface again with the outer door and inner door closed. And it's atmospheric inside. I turned on the scrubbers because it was getting a bit tight. As we got lower, I noticed that the 2 scrubbers just stopped working. And that's, if they stop working, you're up. But we got down to depth. There was a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure just to... Anyway, I thought, right, okay. I said, "You guys just keep flushing us through, and we'll not need the scrubbers as long as you're flushing us through with fresh air." When we get down, I'm looking through, I'm saying left, right. And we just couldn't. We were too far away to get an accurate kind of... And eventually he just goes, "Right, Stephen, you're going to lock out. I want you to lock out." I was like, "Oh, just hold on a second here. These scrubbers are not working." Then something, he'd obviously changed over to gas, and I don't know what the problem was, but he was having problems putting gas because we were going through this procedure. And I just thought, nah. And the Australian guy, young guy, he was like, "Stephen, I don't think this is right." And I was like, "We are not locking out of this bell. This bell's going back up, and then we'll get it fixed, and then we'll dive." And the supervisor was getting really annoyed at me. And this is one thing, is that the only safety officer is you. If you don't like it, don't do it. Don't allow people to pressure you in to doing stupid things. He's obviously getting pressure, and he wants to pass that pressure on you. But there's no danger to him. He's happy to do it. And after a while, I just said, using foul language, "We are effing leaving bottom. You can get us up right now. We're not having this." Up, so he drags us up. We got on deck. And there's these drillers giving me shit. They wouldn't get in the water. They'd shit their pants getting in the water. It annoys me now, even, as you can probably see. So we get on the surface. I just said to the Australian guy, I said, "Come on, let's go and get something to eat." Didn't even listen to them. I said, "You guys have a look at the bell. The scrubbers are not working. There's something wrong with the gas delivery as well. Get it sorted." We went off. The supervisor came. And he sits down with me and he goes, "Right, I've just had a word with the shore, and you're sacked. And you're sacked. You're off tomorrow." Key thing is, I'm still alive. That's a good thing. The young Australian guy was a bit upset. I don't think they needed to get rid of him, but they were just making this example. Eventually, what they figured out was it was nothing to do with stabbing. One of their guide wires had actually twisted. They were eventually able to get the camera, run the camera down. You could see this guide wire had twisted, which was pulling it one way. So what they were going to do was drop one of these, slip it back up, and then tighten up all the guide wires, and it should then align in the bottom. The only problem was, when they were trying to do this, it was about 80, 90, 100 feet, something like that. There was only three other divers, myself and the Australian guy. These 3 guys went down, couldn't get it done. They were on gas, they went down, just couldn't, I don't know why. So I'm in my bunk. I thought, to hell with it, if I'm sacked, I'm going to get my head down. So I'm lying in my bunk. Next minute, supervisor comes in, American supervisor. "Hey, you guys, we need you to do a dive." I was like, "No, you sacked us. We're going off tomorrow. We're not diving. I go, oh, yeah, look, please, can you just do this dive? So like a mug, I thought, right, okay, we'll pop in. So myself and it was a matter of just running the wire and change, you had to hook it off one way. These are big wires. Anyway, we got it sorted. To be truthful, the other 3 divers probably did the bulk of the work. We took the glory. Anyway, they're stabbed in. Everybody's happy. Next morning, and I'm in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, I think everybody will be okay. Yeah. In the afternoon, as soon as we had met the time on the surface, boom, we were off on a supply boat on our way into Dubai. But to be truthful, I didn't really care. Yeah, I felt sorry for the Australian lad. He didn't deserve it. I was the one that was probably being a bit. I was looking after myself, and I think that's an important thing. After that, head back to the UK, and then I'm offshore in the North Sea, and that will be the next episode. I really hope you enjoyed this. I know it's a little bit random. I just do these as I'm thinking. I don't write anything out. So they can be a bit erratic, and my apologies. I really, really appreciate you guys listening. You take care. All the best.